Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you, and enjoy watching. In late 2018, during the height of holiday preparations, Kelsey Berreth began to seriously worry. She hadn't received any news from her 29-year-old daughter, Kelsey, since Thanksgiving. This was unusual for her. Kelsey always kept her informed about her activities, despite being busy with work and raising her daughter, Kay. Feeling anxious, Cheryl contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her daughter. Police officers arrived at Kelsey's home in Woodland Park, Colorado, and found her car parked outside. Inside the house, there were signs that Kelsey had left in a hurry: unwashed dishes in the kitchen, unfinished food, and her personal belongings such as clothes and bags remained untouched. However, her phone and wallet were missing. There were no signs of violent activity, but a missing person report was filed, and information about Kelsey began to circulate. The last time Cheryl spoke with her daughter was on the morning of November 22nd, Thanksgiving Day. Kelsey was in good spirits, baking cinnamon rolls and planning to go to the store for holiday dinner ingredients. That same day, Kelsey went to Safeway supermarket with Kay. She texted her fiance, Patrick Frazee, telling him she had bought sweet potatoes and was planning to make a casserole if he wanted to join them for dinner. After that, no one saw her again. Patrick, to whom Kelsey was engaged, lived on his mother Sheila's ranch. Police approached him to learn details about recent events in Kelsey's life. He claimed that Kelsey had effectively ended their relationship the day before Thanksgiving. According to him, they could no longer get along, but had agreed to share custody of their daughter, Kay. Patrick said that after the breakup, they met in an alley where Kelsey handed over their daughter to him. He also returned some of Kay's belongings to her. He then took the girl to his ranch to celebrate Thanksgiving, but Kelsey never came there. Patrick claimed they continued to communicate, albeit less frequently. He showed investigators text messages where, for example, he asked, "Are you awake?" and received a response from Kelsey saying, "Sorry, didn't hear the phone. Going to take a shower, we'll call you later." He also sent her a message saying, "If this is really what you want, I respect your wish and will give you space." Investigators began to doubt his version of events, as there was nothing in Kelsey's behavior that indicated an intention to end the relationship. A week before this, she had been discussing wedding dresses with her mother and preparing food for a family dinner. Kelsey met Patrick in 2016 through a dating website. He lived on a ranch spanning 22 acres, where he trained herding dogs and cared for horses and donkeys. Kelsey always loved spending time outdoors, and their shared interests brought them closer together. In October 2017, their daughter Kay was born, but despite having a child and being engaged, they continued to live separately. Kelsey lived in Woodland Park, while Patrick lived with his mother on the ranch, and Kelsey didn't want to move there until they could live alone with Patrick and their daughter. The relationship between Kelsey and Patrick deteriorated with each passing month. Kelsey complained to friends that it was difficult for her to maintain the relationship while handling maternal duties. Patrick refused to visit her, and Kelsey felt his interest in their relationship was fading. She also suspected that Patrick might be communicating with his ex-girlfriend, but wasn't certain about this. These thoughts weighed heavily on her. As information about Kelsey's disappearance spread, her friends and family organized a vigil in Washington to draw attention to her disappearance. Investigators continued gathering information, and questions grew about why Kelsey would suddenly decide to end the relationship if she had recently been discussing wedding plans with her mother. Patrick claimed that Kelsey was emotionally unstable and possibly suffering from depression. He even hinted at the possibility of suicide, trying to explain her disappearance. Kelsey's friends confirmed that she was consumed with caring for her daughter and work, but they hadn't noticed any signs of depression or suicidal intentions. She was a flight instructor and loved her job, which gave her opportunities to travel and spend time outdoors, something that always brought her joy. Kelsey was a simple country girl who loved tractors and farming, and her life values were always connected to nature and freedom. However, her dreams of a happy family were gradually fading. Kelsey increasingly noticed that Patrick showed no initiative in their relationship, and despite her attempts to keep the family together, their plans for the future had reached a dead end. She didn't want to live with his mother, and Patrick wasn't willing to change his conditions. This became one of the key factors leading to their breakup. Law enforcement officers searched Kelsey's house and both of her vehicles, but no obvious signs of struggle or break-in were found. At this stage, the disappearance was classified as a missing person case, and police had to turn to the public for help with information. None of Kelsey's acquaintances could believe she would voluntarily leave her daughter for such a long time. The theory about rehabilitation for prohibited substances was also rejected, as none of her friends or family knew of any substance problems or depression. Suspicions began to arise when it was discovered that a few days before her disappearance, Kelsey had told her supervisor that Patrick would be attending the corporate holiday party. Her message contained exclamation points and emojis, emphasizing her excitement. However, Patrick didn't participate in any events after her disappearance. He didn't attend press conferences or candlelight vigils. He didn't call to inquire about the progress of the investigation. Cheryl and Kelsey's brother, Clint, began their own investigation. They decided to return to Kelsey's house to personally check if there was anything that might explain her disappearance. Upon entering the house, they immediately felt intense heat. The heating was turned up to full power. Cinnamon rolls made on Thanksgiving morning were still on the table, and dishes remained unwashed. However, they were alarmed by the refrigerator, which looked as if it had been recently wiped down. There were streak marks on its surface. They also noticed that the bathroom mat was missing, and Clint saw spots that looked like blood on the toilet. Cheryl immediately called the investigators. This time, they came with luminol and a cadaver dog. After processing the rooms, blood traces were discovered, which DNA analysis later confirmed to be Kelsey's blood. The lead investigator noted that Kelsey's behavior before her disappearance didn't match the version suggesting she might have left voluntarily. She was a proud mother, cared for her child, and had never disappeared before. The FBI joined the investigation, and media reports announced a reward of $225,000 for information that could help with the investigation. But suspicions increasingly focused on Patrick, especially after neighbors' surveillance camera footage showed that Patrick had appeared at her house twice on the day of her disappearance. The first time he came with Kelsey and their daughter Kay. However, a few hours later, cameras captured him again, but alone. The recording quality didn't allow for determining whether he was arriving or leaving, but his presence didn't match the version he initially told investigators. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. Despite the lack of obvious evidence, Patrick was becoming the main suspect. From the beginning, he claimed he met Kelsey in an alley where she handed over their child. However, now video recordings proved he was lying. Police increasingly doubted his innocence, especially when it became clear that Patrick avoided any contact with the public and showed no interest in his fiance's fate. The investigation progressed, and each new fact only confirmed that Kelsey couldn't have disappeared voluntarily. On the fourth day after the missing person report was filed, investigators announced they were close to a breakthrough in the case. New data emerged that led to the conclusion that Kelsey might have been murdered. Patrick remained the focus of attention as the only person who could be involved in her disappearance, but there was still no direct evidence. Every detail in this case suggested that Kelsey's disappearance was carefully planned. Patrick, despite claiming their relationship had ended, continued to stay close to Kelsey in her final days. Contact with her colleagues and supervisors also showed no indication of personal life problems or intention to disappear. It seemed that Kelsey's entire life had been abruptly cut short without any visible reason. Cheryl and Clint didn't give up, continuing to pursue the truth and trying to find answers to their questions. They were convinced that Kelsey couldn't have abandoned her daughter and simply vanished. The entire house where she lived practically screamed that something had gone wrong. The heating turned up to maximum, the freshly wiped refrigerator, the missing bathroom mat. All of this pointed to attempts to cover up traces. The blood traces found in the house only confirmed their worst fears. With each passing day, it became increasingly clear that Kelsey's story wasn't just a missing person case, but a much darker and more frightening mystery. Patrick, the man who claimed to love her, became the prime suspect, and police increasingly focused their attention on his actions. His strange behavior and false testimony led investigators to think he was hiding something, and that this something might be connected to Kelsey's disappearance. By this point, Kelsey's case had become a real test for both the police and her family. Despite all efforts, investigators still couldn't find the answer to the main question: what happened to Kelsey on the day she stopped communicating? When Woodland Park police returned to Patrick's house to conduct another routine check, they noticed that earthwork had been conducted on the property. Using drones, they documented these changes, but Kelsey's body was not found. Investigators continued to interact with Patrick, not taking active steps to arrest him, and the ongoing investigation remained a mystery to the press and public. Meanwhile, the Evidence Collection Task Force turned their attention to Kelsey's house. Searches were conducted, and police officers removed several brown bags, though what was inside wasn't disclosed. It was obvious that investigators were at the stage of analyzing and verifying collected evidence. Soon, one of Crystal's friends approached the police with important information, telling them that Crystal had shared details that could influence the course of the investigation. According to her, Patrick had once told Crystal that he needed to deal with his child's mother. Both women interpreted this as a suggestion to get rid of Kelsey. Phone data became one of the important elements in this case. Information from Kelsey's phone showed that her device was near Patrick's phone for several days after her disappearance. The last signals from Kelsey's phone were recorded in Idaho, and messages to Patrick, her boss, and her mother Cheryl were sent from there. It soon became clear that these messages weren't sent by Kelsey, but by Crystal, as they used the same cell towers near her residence. Police conducted searches on vast areas of land connected to Patrick under a warrant obtained on December 14th. A warrant was also issued to check his phone. These activities revealed an important contact. The number that caught investigators' attention belonged to a woman named Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse living in Idaho. Initially, Crystal denied knowing Patrick, stating she had only been to his place to buy horses. However, it was discovered that she and Patrick had been in a long but unstable relationship for more than 10 years. Crystal's ex-husband confirmed this, adding that after their divorce, the relationship between Crystal and Patrick strengthened. Meanwhile, investigators began analyzing motives that might have pushed Patrick to make Kelsey disappear. According to Crystal, Patrick often described Kelsey as a bad mother and an addict, claiming he wanted to save his daughter and gain full custody of her. At the same time, he was in a difficult financial situation, had defaulted on a $72,000 loan payment, and hadn't paid child support to Kelsey since July. Moreover, Patrick turned out to be the beneficiary of a life insurance policy recently taken out by Kelsey, which increased suspicion of his possible involvement in her disappearance. Investigators approached Crystal again, presenting all the collected evidence, and then she decided to tell the truth. Crystal confessed that she and Patrick had maintained a periodic romance for many years, and that Patrick had asked her to kill Kelsey. Initially, he suggested she poison Kelsey by adding poison to coffee and delivering it to her while pretending to be a stranger. When this plan didn't work, Patrick tried to convince Crystal to beat Kelsey to death. Under the pressure of evidence, Crystal agreed to cooperate with the investigation, but set conditions. She would plead guilty to a less serious crime, specifically tampering with evidence, for which she would face no more than 3 years in prison. Investigators accepted her offer, and Crystal showed them Kelsey's house, where they found numerous pieces of evidence, including blood traces on the floor, walls, and appliances. This confirmed the violence that had occurred in Kelsey's apartment. Meanwhile, police continued searching for Kelsey's body, but it was never found. The question about the romance between Patrick and Crystal and its possible connection to Kelsey's disappearance remained open. Investigators were in the process of putting all pieces of the puzzle together, trying to understand if Patrick's personal motives and financial problems had truly become the cause of the tragedy. The police spokesperson stated that the investigation was progressing but didn't reveal specific details. The excavations near Patrick's house and evidence collection at Kelsey's house suggested that the investigation was reaching its conclusion, but specific answers were yet to be found. The police still hadn't arrested Patrick, but continued communication with him, looking for new evidence and trying to gather enough proof for charges. Crystal, in turn, was ready to testify against Patrick, which could become a key step in resolving the case. The investigation was gathering new facts, and police officers worked around the clock to figure out what really happened to Kelsey and what roles Patrick and Crystal played in this. Patrick Frazee was arrested on December 21st and charged with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and 6 other crimes. He pleaded not guilty. During the investigation of Kelsey's case, it drew the attention of police and FBI agents actively working on it in Colorado and other states. Investigators methodically searched Kelsey's house for additional evidence and actively monitored Patrick. On Friday morning after the arrest, Patrick appeared in court via video link, and police continued searching for new evidence. This case caused a significant response, but none of Kelsey's family was present in the courtroom. Back in November 2018, events unfolded rapidly. On November 22nd, Kelsey was in constant contact with Patrick. Calls and messages were recorded between their phones starting from 1 o'clock in the morning. At 9:37 in the morning, Kelsey sent Patrick a message, after which they briefly talked on the phone. She told him about preparing Thanksgiving dinner and planning to go to the supermarket. Later, Patrick claimed they parted ways after a brief meeting where Kelsey handed over their daughter Kay. However, this wasn't their last meeting. Patrick and Kelsey's cell phones connected to the same tower throughout the day, from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 4:30 in the evening. At 1:24 in the afternoon, Patrick was seen entering Kelsey's house with her. Then, according to Crystal, Patrick blindfolded Kelsey under the pretense of guessing a candle's scent, then grabbed a baseball bat and began striking her. He beat her to death while their young daughter was in another room. Kelsey's last words, as Patrick later claimed, were, "Please stop." After the murder, Patrick took his daughter to Walmart to fill up the car, then returned to Kelsey's house. He was seen near the house around 3:30 in the afternoon, and then called his mother Sheila and Crystal, telling the latter that she needed to come to Colorado to clean up the mess. Crystal understood that Kelsey had been killed and that she needed to clean the house. She gathered bleach, gloves, and set out on an 8-hour drive from Idaho to Colorado. Patrick, after finishing the call, placed Kelsey's body in a plastic container and went to Nash Ranch to temporarily hide it. Both phones continued connecting to the same towers while he transported the body. After this, he returned home to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner with his daughter and family. When Crystal arrived at Kelsey's house, she spent several hours cleaning. According to her testimony, she intentionally left several blood traces so that Patrick would eventually get caught and the truth would come out. She also put detergent in the washing machine with towels, although she had been asked to wash everything. After this, she and Patrick went to Nash Ranch to retrieve Kelsey's body. Returning to Patrick's home, they brought a bag with them. Patrick made 19 calls to Crystal and sent numerous messages from both phones, pretending to be Kelsey. Then they placed the bag in a large trough, poured 5 gallons of gasoline, and watched everything burn. Crystal added Kelsey's Bible and some of Kay's toys to the fire. Patrick's mother Sheila watched this from the side. Later, she became an important witness in the case. Crystal also took Kelsey's gun and phone to continue creating a false impression by sending text messages. Patrick asked her to take the gun to create the illusion that Kelsey might have been planning to commit suicide. Crystal destroyed Kelsey's phone, and Patrick, panicking, drove to Verizon to find out if data could be recovered from a non-working phone. Later, Patrick and Crystal discussed the container. Crystal described it as aluminum, round, and without a bottom. She parked it on the property and got out to talk with Patrick. At this moment, Patrick handed her Kelsey's phone and gave instructions about what to do with it. When Patrick lit the fire, Crystal was nearby, helping collect wood and stack it in the fire pit. Patrick used gasoline and motor oil to ignite the flames. Patrick's mother, Sheila, came out and stood on the terrace, watching what was happening. Crystal remembered how Sheila came out from behind two trees and headed toward the house. The events related to Kelsey's murder became known thanks to Crystal's testimony and cell phone data, which allowed police in early March to reconstruct the chronology of events and strengthen the evidence against Patrick. All these actions and details led to the case becoming increasingly convincing, and soon Patrick Frazee's arrest followed. The trial of Patrick Frazee began in October 2019, almost a year after his fiancée Kelsey's disappearance. Photography and live reporting were prohibited in the courtroom, and security measures were enhanced. The jury heard testimony from key witnesses, including Crystal Lee Kenny, who had previously pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence, and an inmate who was in the same cell with Patrick. Patrick passed notes to the inmate on toilet paper, asking for help in getting rid of people who knew about what happened. These notes mentioned Crystal, her friend, and Kelsey's mother, Cheryl. He wanted them all to disappear and remain invisible until a certain date, and expressed his desire for Crystal to be killed. After several hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Patrick Frazee guilty of murdering his fiancée Kelsey and all charges against him. Patrick was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus 3 consecutive terms of 48 years for 3 counts of solicitation of murder, and 12 years for destroying the body. In total, he received life imprisonment plus 156 years. The judge noted that Patrick's actions were cruel and senseless. After beating his fiancée, he burned her body like trash. The judge emphasized that such a crime deserved the harshest punishment provided by law. Crystal Lee was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 1 year of probation. This was the maximum punishment that the victim's family had requested. District Attorney Dan May stated that the deal with Crystal was like making a deal with the devil, but was necessary to put Patrick behind bars. However, he believed Crystal received too lenient a sentence. Nurse Crystal Lee Kenny had pleaded guilty in January of that year to destroying evidence, helping Patrick Frazee. Kenny cooperated with the investigation and testified against Frazee, becoming a key prosecution witness. According to some sources, Crystal and Patrick had a romantic relationship, and her family claimed she only participated because of threats from Patrick. On the day of the trial, Kenny was released but faced prison time. The lead investigator, with 37 years of experience, was glad that Crystal provided answers to some questions. However, her confession didn't change the fact that Kelsey's body was never found. Crystal claimed that Patrick burned the body, and the investigator had to tell this to Kelsey's parents. Patrick's parents, Sheila and her husband, also had to endure shock. Sheila was detained but not arrested, and later the court held an emergency hearing regarding custody of Kelsey's daughter, Kay. Patrick's parents tried to obtain custody rights, but the court ruled that Kay should remain with her grandmother, Cheryl, Kelsey's mother. If Crystal's testimony was truthful, and Sheila really did see her son burning Kelsey's body, then the court's decision to leave the child with Cheryl was justified. Patrick, according to many of Kelsey's friends, didn't surprise them with his actions. His former girlfriend, Vanessa, claimed that Patrick had always been able to manipulate people and possessed a sharp mind. Their relationship, which began with mutual attraction, quickly turned emotionally abusive and controlling. They finally ended in 2014 when Vanessa realized his behavior perfectly matched the description of a psychopath. she believed Crystal fell under Patrick's influence, just as she herself once had. Vanessa also claimed that Patrick was a complex person who knew how to prey on people's weaknesses. Questions that remained unanswered stayed on the agenda, despite Crystal's testimony. The investigator mentally prepared himself to talk with Kelsey's parents and hoped that he could find her body. However, upon learning that the body had been burned, the investigator struggled with having to relay this news to Kelsey's parents, Cheryl, and her husband. District Attorney Dan May expressed dissatisfaction with Crystal Lee's lenient sentence after her sentencing. According to him, Crystal Lee wasn't even serving her full sentence, and he planned to appeal to the legislature to fight against attempts to increase the number of good deeds that could reduce prison time. May also compared the deal with Crystal to a deal with the devil, but acknowledged it as a necessary measure to put Patrick behind bars. Kelsey's remains were never found. In the small town of Woodland Park, that Thanksgiving Day left a dark mark in the town's history. Residents tried to do everything possible to erase this mark. Volunteers, builders, and other local businesses united to restore Kelsey's house so it could be sold. One neighbor said this was their way of showing that Woodland Park wasn't about Patrick Frazee, but about good people. Kelsey's family acknowledged that achieving a conviction without Crystal's cooperation would have been extremely difficult. However, they, like many others, believed she deserved a harsher punishment. The only thing she didn't do was deliver the final blow, they said. The thought that Kelsey's daughter would grow up without a mother was unbearable for everyone. Patrick's actions seemed senseless and cruel. His motives remained a mystery. Kelsey's uncle noted that Kelsey gave the best hugs, and everyone would deeply miss that. Crystal was resentenced to 18 months and released on parole in 2021. Her 3-year sentence didn't actually mean full imprisonment, as upon entering the correctional facility, she immediately received credit for half the time for good behavior. Investigator May emphasized that the sentence handed down in the courtroom should have been the time a person actually serves. He noted that the deal with the devil was inevitable and brought no pride, but without it, justice for Kelsey would not have been achieved. The lead investigator added that Crystal committed terrible acts, and while they weren't as cruel as Patrick's actions, her actions were also serious. The investigator found it difficult to understand why she made such decisions, especially because he had never dealt with domestic violence. He acknowledged that he respected the dynamics of such situations, but she was a smart woman and a good mother. The decision she made remained incomprehensible, and probably no one would ever understand it. Nevertheless, without her help, they couldn't have achieved what they did. Another detective, despite everything he learned, still struggled between sympathy and disgust at her actions. He noted that having no experience with domestic violence, it was difficult for him to understand how someone could do such things and not go to the police. For him, it remained a mystery. One of the detectives also added that there were no photographs of victims in his office, but he remembered all his victims, especially in cases like this. Kelsey was one of those he would remember for a long time. He couldn't understand why Patrick did what he did. How could a person, whether Patrick or anyone else, be so cruel to the mother of their child? The district attorney and another officer noted that, unfortunately, they never met Kelsey in person, but would have liked to under different circumstances. They knew that working in the aviation industry or the military wasn't easy for a woman. But Kelsey managed it. She was a respected and valued employee, and feedback from colleagues and students showed what a wonderful person she was. She was dedicated not only to her daughter, but also to her country. All people involved in the investigation, including FBI agents, prosecutors, and other agencies, truly cared about her. Patrick Frazee, convicted of murder, tried to appeal his sentence, but in 2023, his petition was denied. The lead investigator acknowledged that Crystal made serious mistakes, but the justice they achieved would have been impossible without her help. The events that occurred that Thanksgiving Day left their marks, and the town tried to move forward, gradually restoring not only Kelsey's house, but also its reputation. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to your comments on this situation. That was Detective STARBORN. See you soon.